In the heart of Enugu, nestled among the bustling markets and busy streets, there lived a man named Ekene, a name that echoed in the corridors of wealth and success. Ekene was known far and wide as the man who turned everything he touched into gold. His rise to prominence was nothing short of meteoric. In a matter of years, he had transformed from a struggling trader into one of the wealthiest businessmen in the state. But there was more to Emeka's story that met the eye. Beneath the veneer of his success lay a dark secret, one that not even his closest friends could fathom. Ekene's wealth was not the fruit of hard work alone. It was the result of a pact made with forces beyond human comprehension. In the dead of the night, while the city slept, Ekene would retreat to a secret room in his sprawling mansion. There, hidden from the world, was a coffin, a vessel of ungodly power. Every night, Ekene would lay in that coffin, sealing himself within its cold embrace, and by morning, his wealth would multiply. The ritual was simple yet terrifying. Sleep in the coffin, and by dawn, the darkness that filled it would steep into the world, bringing Ekene untold riches. But his wealth came at a cost, one that Ekene was willing to pay. His wife, Amaka, and his young son, Chibuike, knew nothing of the secret room. To them, Ekene was simply a hard-working man who spent long nights in his study, attending to his business affairs. Little did they know that his business affairs involved dealing with forces far beyond the mortal realm. Chibuike, a curious and playful 10-year-old, was the apple of his father's eye. His laughter filled the house with joy, and his innocent questions brought a smile to even the most hardened heart. But like any child, Chibuike was curious, and one day, that curiosity would lead to the discovery that would unravel the fabric of his family's life. It was a Saturday afternoon when the fateful incident occurred. Ekene had left for a business meeting, and Amaka was busy preparing lunch in the kitchen. Chibuike, with nothing to occupy his restless mind, began exploring the house. He had wandered through every room before, but there was one door he had never seen opened, the door to his father's study. His small hands pressed against the wooden door, and to his surprise, it creaked open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with the scent of old books and something else, something he couldn't quite place. It was an odor that seemed to slither into his nostrils and coil around his senses, drawing him deeper into the room. At the far end of the study, behind a large bookshelf, Chibuike noticed something unusual, a faint line running along the wall. It was a door, cleverly hidden behind the books. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached it, the thrill of discovery pushing him forward. With a child's innocence, he pushed against the hidden door, and it swung open to reveal a staircase leading down into darkness. Chibuike hesitated for a moment, his mind battling with fear and curiosity. But curiosity won, and he descended the stairs, one step at a time. The air grew colder as he went deeper, and the light from the study above faded into nothingness. When he reached the bottom, he found himself standing in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a coffin, its lid slightly ajar. Chibuike's eyes widened with fascination. He had seen coffins before, at funerals, but this one was different. It was not adorned with flowers or draped in clothes. It was a simple wooden box, unassuming, and yet there was something about it that called to him. Without a second thought, Chibuike approached the coffin. His small hands reached out, and before he knew it, he had lifted the lid and peered inside. It was empty, just a dark, hollow space. A child's imagination is a powerful thing, and Chibuike's was no exception. In his mind, the coffee was a pirate's chest, filled with hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. He climbed inside, giggling to himself as he lay down, pretending to be a pirate king in his treasure-filled tube. But as soon as the lid closed over him, the laughter died in his throat. The darkness within the coffee was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was thick, suffocating, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Chibuike tried to push the lid open, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and he screamed, but no sound escaped the coffee's confines. Above, in the kitchen, Amaka heard nothing of her son's plight. She continued with her chores, blissfully unaware that her son was trapped in a prison of darkness just below her feet. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours for Chibuike. His heart raced, his breath came in shallow gaps, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He pounded on the lid with all his might, but it was as if the coffee had a will of its own, refusing to let him go. Then, just as he thought he would be trapped forever, the lid creaked open on its own. Gasping for air, Chibuike scrambled out of the coffin and fled the room, tears streaming down his face. He raced up the stairs, through the study, and into the safety of the sunlight-filled hallway. But the experience had left him shaking, and though he didn't understand what had just happened, he knew one thing for certain: he would never go near that coffin again. When Ekene returned home that evening, he found his son pale and trembling, his eyes filled with a fear he had never seen before. But Chibuike said nothing of what had happened. Instead, he clung to his mother, refusing to let go. That night, as Ekene prepared for his rituals, something strange began to unfold. The coffee, which had always been a source of power and wealth, now seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The moment Ekene laid inside, he felt it, a coldness that seeped into his bones, chilling him to the core. By morning, the change was evident. Ekene's business, which had been thriving just the day before, suddenly took a turn for the worst. Contracts were cancelled, deals fell through, and his once loyal customers began to desert him. Panic gripped Ekene as he watched his empire crumble before his eyes. But it wasn't just his business that was affected. Chibuike, who had been a vibrant and healthy child, fell seriously ill. No doctor could diagnose the cause of his ailment, and no medicine seemed to help. He grew weaker by the day, his strength ebbing away like water through a sieve. Desperate, Ekene turned to the only source of power he knew, the coffee. But when he entered the secret room, he found that the coffee was no longer a source of wealth. Instead, it had become a harbinger of death, and the darkness within it had latched onto his son, draining the life from him. In a frantic bid to save Chibuike, Ekene sought out the same dark forces he had once bargained with, but the answer was one he did not want to hear. "You have defined the balance," the spirit whispered. "The life of your son is now the price for your greed. Only by relinquishing all that you have gained can you hope to save him." The world struck Ekene like a hammer blow. Give up his wealth? Live in poverty for 30 years? The very thought was unbearable. He had spent his life building his empire, crowning his way to the top. How could he let it all go? But the spirits were merciless. "Choose," the east, your wealth, or your son? The choice is yours, but remember, time is running out. Ekene was tormented by the decision. On one hand, his love for his son was undeniable, but on the other hand, the thought of losing everything he had worked so hard to achieve was too much to bear. In the end, it was his greed that won. I cannot let go of my wealth, Ekene said, his voice trembling with resolve. I will have other sons, but this wealth, it is mine, and I will not part with it. As the words left his lips, the spirit laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the darkness. Ekene knew then that he had sealed his fate, and with it, the fate of his son. Over the next few days, Chibuike's condition worsened. His one bright eyes dimmed, his laughter faded into silence, and his breath grew shallow. Amaka wept at his bedside, pleading with the gods for mercy, but there was none to be found. And then, one morning, just as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, Chibuike took his last breath. The grief that followed was overwhelming. Amaka was inconsolable, her cries filling the house with sorrow. But Ekene, though he mourned the loss of his son, found himself strangely detached. His mind was already consumed with the thought of how to rebuild his business, how to regain the wealth that had slipped through his fingers. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As the days turned into weeks, Ekene found that no matter what he did, his business continued to falter. His once loyal associates abandoned him, his investments failed, and his wealth doing good to nothing. The mansion that had once been a symbol of his success was sold off piece by piece until there was nothing left but the memories of his lost son and the darkness that had taken him. Ekene and Amaka were forced to move into a small, wretched house on the outskirts of the city. The grandeur that had once surrounded them was now a distant memory, replaced by the cold, hard reality of poverty. Amaka, broken by the loss of her son, became a shadow of her former self. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and love, were now hollow as she barely spoke, lost in her own world of grief. Ekene, however, could not let go of his obsession with wealth. He spent his days in a futile quest to rebuild his empire, chasing after one failed venture after another. But no matter how hard he tried, success eluded him. It was as if a curse had been placed upon him, and no amount of effort could lift it. The years passed slowly, each one more grueling than the last. Ekene aged rapidly. The toll of his choices etched into his face. The man who had once been the epitome of power and success was now a broken, defeated figure, wandering through life with nothing to show for his efforts but the ashes of his past. One day, as Ekene sat alone in the dim light of his small home, he heard a faint knock at the door. It was unusual for anyone to visit them, and for a moment he wondered if it was a mistake. But the knock came again, more insistent this time. With a heavy sigh, he rose from the chair and opened the door. Standing on the threshold was an old man, his clothes tattered and his face lined with age. There was something familiar about him, though Ekene couldn't quite place it. "Who are you?" Ekene asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. The old man smiled, a sad, knowing smile. I am someone who has been watching you for a long time, Ekene. I have seen your rise, your fall, and the choices you have made. Ekene felt a chill run down his spine. What do you want from me? The old man stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I have come to offer you one final chance, Ekene. A chance to make amends for the wrongs you have done, to find peace in the time you have left. Ekene scoffed. Peace? What peace can there be for a man like me? I lost my son. My wife is a ghost of herself, and I have nothing left. What more can be taken from me? The old man shook his head. There is always something more to lose, Ekene, but there is also something to gain, if you are willing to listen. Ekene eyed the old man warily but gestured for him to sit. Speak then, I have nothing but time. The old man sat across from Ekene. His eyes is piercing and wise. You have spent your life chasing after wealth, blinded by your greed. You sacrifice your son, your family, and your soul in pursuit of riches. But wealth is fleeting, Ekene. It is not what defines a man, nor what brings true happiness. Ekene bristled at the words, but he remained silent, listening. Your son's death was not just a loss, the old man continued. It was a consequence of your choices. The spirits offered you a chance to save him, but you chose wealth over his life. That decision has brought you to where you are now, living in misery and regret. A tear slipped down Ekene's cheek. The weight of the old man's words piercing through the wall he had built around his heart. I was wrong, he whispered, his voice cracking. I was so wrong, but it's too late now. My son is gone, and I can never undo what I've done. The old man nodded, his expression softening. It is true that you cannot bring your son back, but you can still make amends. You can choose to live the rest of your life differently, to seek redemption for the pain you have caused. You have 30 years left, Ekene, 30 years that you must live in poverty and suffering. But those years can be spent helping others, using what little you have to bring light to the lives of those around you. Ekene looked down at his hands, wrinkled and worn. How can I help others when I have nothing? You have your experience, your knowledge, and your heart. You know what it is to rise and fall, to gain and lose. Use that wisdom to guide others, to prevent them from making the same mistakes you did. Share your story, and in doing so, you may find peace. For the first time in years, Ekene felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a tiny spark in the darkness that had consumed him. And what if I fail? What if I cannot find the strength to change? The old man reached out and placed a hand on Ekene's shoulder. You have already taken the first step, Ekene. You have acknowledged your mistakes. The path to redemption is long and difficult, but you do not have to walk it alone. There are those who will help you if you let them. Ekene nodded slowly, the old man's words resonating deep within him. I will try, he said softly. I will try to make things right. For my son, for Amaka, and for myself. The old man smiled again, a warm, comforting smile that filled Ekene with a sense of calm. That is all anyone can ask of you, Ekene. The rest is up to you. With those words, the old man rose and made his way to the door. As he opened it, he turned back to Ekene. Remember, it is never too late to change. The past is waiting, but the future is yours to shape. And with that, the old man was gone, leaving Ekene alone with his thoughts. For a long time, Ekene sat in silence, and the old man was echoing in his mind. Slowly, he began to see a way forward, a way to live the rest of his life with purpose, even if it meant enduring hardship. He would dedicate himself to helping others, to sharing his story and guiding those who were lost. In the days that followed, Ekene began to make small changes. He visited the local church, offering his services to the community. He volunteered at the orphanage, spending time with children who had no parents, sharing stories of his son and the lessons he had learned. He became a mentor to young businessmen, warning them the dangers of greed and the importance of integrity. Amaka, though still deeply grieving, began to see the change in her husband. Slowly, she too began to heal, finding solace in the knowledge that her son's death had not been in vain. Together, they rebuilt their lives, not in wealth, but in love and compassion. As the years passed, Ekene found that the weight of his guilt began to lift. He would never forget the choices he had made, but he had learned to forgive himself and to live a life that honored the memory of his son. And in that forgiveness, he found the peace that had eluded him for so long. The 30 years has passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Ekene had aged significantly, his body frail and his hair white as snow, but his spirit was strong. He had lived a life of service, and though he had never regained his wealth, he had gained something far more valuable: the respect and love of those he had helped along the way. On the final day of the 30 years, Ekene sat by the window of his small home, watching the sun set over the horizon. There was a sense of completion in his heart, a feeling that he had finally made amends for the wrongs he had done. As the last rays of sunlight faded, he felt a presence beside him, a familiar, comforting presence. He turned to see the old man, standing there with a gentle smile on his face. "It is time, Ekene," the old man said softly. Ekene nodded, a peaceful smile spreading across his face. "I am ready." And with that, Ekene closed his eyes for the first time, his soul finally at peace. The story of Ekene, the man who had once been consumed by greed but found redemption in the end, became a legend in the community. His life was a testament to the power of change, of forgiveness, and of the enduring human spirit. And though he was gone, his legacy lives on, a beacon of hope for those who had lost their way.